From retro waves, the channel where timeless voices live forever, comes the story of Whitney Houston, a woman whose voice could move mountains, but who carried a weight no one truly saw. February 11th, 2012. The Beverly Hilton Hotel was glowing, cameras flashing, stylists rushing, music executives laughing over cocktails in preparation for Clive Davis's iconic pre-Grammy party. Upstairs, in Suite 434, time was slowing down. Whitney Elizabeth Houston, 48 years old, was alone. The voice that once lifted stadiums into stillness now filled only the walls of a silent room. A half-eaten sandwich, a gospel song playing faintly in the background, and a bath that was never meant to be her final stage. She had rehearsed that week, not just songs, but hope. The comeback was finally happening. Sparkle had wrapped. She had sung in church again. There were flickers of light. And yet, something in the air felt unfinished. When the news broke, Whitney Houston found unresponsive. It didn't feel real. The world didn't just lose a singer. It lost a presence, a purity, a power. The kind of voice that only comes once in a generation, if that. But how did it come to this? How did the fresh-faced girl from Newark, with a gospel soul and supermodel smile, rise to become the voice, only to fall so far, so tragically, while the world watched? Was it the weight of perfection, the pressure of fame, the loneliness of being idolized but rarely understood? Or was there something deeper, a spiritual battle between gift and burden, between calling and chaos? This is not just a story about talent. It's about a woman who was chosen, celebrated, broken, and still unforgettable. Before the silence, there was a sound so powerful it could part pain from joy, a sound that sang of love, of loss, of longing. Whitney's sound. And even now, all these years later, if you close your eyes, you can still hear it. Before she was Whitney, before she was the voice, she was just Nippy, a little girl with big eyes and a voice too grown for her age. Whitney Elizabeth Houston was born on August 9th, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey, the youngest of 3 children in a household filled with both love and limitations. Her mother, Sissy Houston, was a powerhouse gospel singer, strong, disciplined, protective. Her father, John, was charming but complicated. And her extended family tree? A musical legacy in bloom. Cousins Dion and Dee Dee Warwick, Aretha Franklin, her honorary Aunt Ree. But Newark was no fairy tale. By the time Whitney was 4, the city would be scarred by riots, racial tension, and poverty. The family later moved to East Orange, not much safer, but slightly more stable. In the middle of that storm, Whitney found sanctuary, New Hope Baptist Church. It was there, among wooden pews and the trembling hands of elders, that she first opened her mouth, and the room fell silent. Just 11 years old, singing, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah." One deacon reportedly said, "It was like God stopped to listen." From that moment on, the church wasn't just a place to worship. It was her first stage. Her voice became the talk of the congregation, clear, effortless, soulful beyond comprehension. Sissy trained her like a pro. No shortcuts, no ego, just discipline, vocal control, harmony, rehearsals. She didn't allow Whitney to coast on talent. She made her work. Still, Whitney's voice had something even Sissy's didn't, a purity, a shimmering ribbon of emotion that wrapped around every note. At home, Whitney would mimic her idols, Aretha, Chaka Khan, Gladys Knight. But she also sang into hairbrushes in front of the mirror, watching herself become the woman the world had yet to meet. She was gentle, often shy, But music gave her strength. She once said, "When I sing, I feel strong, like I can fly." But behind the curtains of the church and home rehearsals, things weren't always easy. Her parents' marriage had its fractures. There were rumors of emotional distance, pressure, and the quiet scars that would later bleed into her music. Still, the light inside her never dimmed. By the time she was a teenager, it was clear. This wasn't just a girl who could sing. This was a girl chosen to sing, and the world would soon come calling. The 1980s weren't ready. They thought they had heard it all, until she walked in, young, radiant, and carrying a voice that didn't just hit notes, it lived in them. In her teens, Whitney started singing backup for her mother. She also modeled, tall, elegant, magnetic. In 1981, she became one of the first black women to grace the cover of 17 magazine. But it wasn't the flashbulbs that made her shine. It was what happened when the music started. She was singing backup for Lou Rawls and Chaka Khan when a powerful man heard about the girl with the velvet thunder in her voice. That man? Clive Davis. At Sweetwater's, a small Manhattan nightclub, Clive sat at a table and watched the future of pop music unfold before him. Whitney sang "The Greatest Love of All," and time stopped. He later said, "You don't find voices like that. You pray for them." He signed her to Arista Records immediately. In 1985, her debut album dropped, Whitney Houston, and from the moment "You Give Good Love" hit the airwaves, everything changed. 3 number-1 singles, over 25 million copies sold. Critics called her a once-in-a-century talent. But behind the success was a quiet struggle. Whitney was being positioned to appeal to a white mainstream audience. Some in the black community called her a sellout. She was even booed at the Soul Train Awards. It hurt, but she kept singing. And in her singing, her soul answered. Her sophomore album, Whitney, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. She became the first woman to ever do that. Hits like "I Wanna Dance with Somebody" lit up the world with joy. Her smile, her laugh, her hair, her gowns. She was a vision. But that voice could melt heartbreak into gold. She was pop, R&B, gospel, and soul, all at once. And when she sang, you didn't just listen, you believed. In 1991, she performed the national anthem at the Super Bowl, in a white tracksuit with the American flag stitched to her chest. And somehow, she made the Star-Spangled Banner sound like a love song. It became a top 20 hit. No one had ever done that. By the time she was cast in The Bodyguard opposite Kevin Costner in 1992, Whitney was more than a singer. She was a global icon. And when she sang "I Will Always Love You," stripped down, a cappella, holding that first note for what felt like a lifetime, the world stood still. The single went on to become the best-selling song by a female artist in music history. Over 20 million copies. Every karaoke bar, every wedding, every farewell performance. It belonged to her. But even in all the glory, there was a soft ache in her eyes, a longing for simplicity, for church, for quiet. "I love singing," she once said, "but sometimes I just want to be Whitney, not Whitney Houston." The higher the notes soared, the heavier the crown became. By the mid-1990s, Whitney Houston was on top of the world. The Bodyguard had made her a movie star. Her voice had become a national treasure. She was beloved, imitated, honored, and she was exhausted. In 1992, Whitney married singer Bobby Brown, a pairing that shocked the public. She, the pristine pop princess. He, the bad boy of New Edition. But Whitney, for all her elegance, had always been drawn to edge. "I'm from Newark," she once said. "Don't get it twisted." Their love was passionate, fiery, and, over time, toxic. Rumors of infidelity, jealousy, addiction, and violence followed them like shadows. Paparazzi stalked their every move, and slowly Whitney began to change. Her once flawless live performances became erratic. She canceled shows. She appeared thin, distracted. The voice, that golden voice, started to falter. In 2002, she sat down with Diane Sawyer for one of the most infamous interviews in pop history. Eyes sharp but weary, she faced the rumors head-on. "Crack is whack," she said with a nervous smile. "I make too much money to ever smoke crack." But the public didn't laugh. They mourned. Something was slipping away. Then came Being Bobby Brown in 2005, a chaotic, deeply personal reality show that aired the couple's dysfunction for the world to see. Fans were stunned by Whitney's behavior. It was raw, unfiltered, a far cry from the poised performer who once held Grammys with grace. But even in the darkest moments, there were glimpses of the old Whitney, when she laughed, when she sang, when she looked at her daughter, Bobby Christina. Whitney was trying, reaching, still showing up. In interviews, she spoke of her faith, how she still prayed, still believed she was chosen. "If I had to name my biggest devil," she once said, "it would be me." But she also admitted that fame had changed her. The pressure to be perfect, the loneliness, the feeling of never being enough. The voice hadn't just been her gift, it had become her cage. By 2009, there was hope. Whitney released I Look to You, her first studio album in 7 years. The world watched with cautious optimism. Could she come back? The voice was not what it once was, raspier, weathered, but still unmistakably Whitney. Songs like I Didn't Know My Own Strength felt like personal confessions wrapped in melody. The album debuted at #1, and just like that, the spark returned. She toured internationally in 2010, but the cracks were still there. Performances were hit or miss. Reviews were mixed. Fans were divided, some heartbroken, others loyal. But Whitney never gave up. In 2011, she filmed Sparkle, a remake of a film that had once inspired her as a girl. She played the mother, a guiding light. In one scene she sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," her voice fragile, trembling, but full of faith. On February 9th, 2012, she sang "Jesus Loves Me" at Kelly Price's pre-Grammy party. It would be the last song the world would ever hear her sing. 2 days later, she was gone. Her death was ruled an accidental drowning, with heart disease and cocaine use listed as contributing factors. But in truth, Whitney didn't just die that day. She had been fading for years, a light dimmed too soon by pressure, pain, and the ache of a life too big for one person to carry alone. Whitney Houston left behind more than songs. She left echoes. She changed the sound of radio, opened doors for black artists on MTV, raised the bar for every vocalist that followed. From Mariah Carey to Brandy, Beyoncé to Jennifer Hudson, her influence is undeniable. "You can't listen to any female singer today without hearing Whitney in them," one critic said. She won 6 Grammys, 22 American Music Awards, 2 Emmys, and sold over 200 million records. But more than numbers, she made people feel. She made heartbreak sound beautiful. She made love sound like church. She made millions believe they were worthy of the greatest love of all. Her daughter, Bobby Christina, would tragically pass just 3 years later, under eerily similar circumstances, as if Whitney's heart had never truly stopped beating until hers did too. Yet even in sorrow, the music survives. From the Bodyguard soundtrack still being played at weddings, to her gospel performances still bringing people to tears, to new generations discovering I Will Always Love You on streaming platforms. Whitney didn't just leave us with songs, she left us with a standard, a reminder that beauty, even when broken, can still shine. She once said, "I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadow." And she didn't. She walked in her own light, even when the world couldn't handle how bright it was. The voice is gone, but the echo?